Hello, I'm Chris, the Tabletop Fox, and welcome to my video on Halo Flashpoint, particularly the UNSC faction and reviewing their units and how they are in Season 1. In this video, we're going to follow on from the Zvezda with another Spartan that's a bit of a grandpa, and that is the CQB. So, this model came out with the Wargame Cerberus expansions that marked the introduction of points into the game, and at the time of it coming out, and still to this day, it does have a slight issue. The CQB is a melee unit, very much a melee unit. Base weapons are both melee based. Its keyword of being imposing is built around melee, adding an extra dice when you are survival testing or fighting in melee, and its best stat being fight on a 4-up. So not quite as good as the Brawler, tying with the Mark 7 there. However, it has then the same range stat as a Brawler, which is a 5-up. So it's also got that issue with not being the greatest at shooting, and he doesn't even come with a shooting weapon because both weapons are melee and they have lunge, so even if you shoot with them, it will use the fight stat. So the biggest issue with this boy being a melee unit is he is a 1-3 speed Spartan, which we already talked about with Zvezda, how 1 speed can be a problem. However, the Zvezda has a preference for being at range, so it's not the worst for him. The CQB doesn't have that favour. It makes up for it being a lot more tanky by having a 3-up armour, which is a very good trait to have because it just means that weapons with no AP are losing 3 dice to get even through. So Deadeye's DMR is going to have some problems going through it. He also has an extra HP just to add, so when you get through, you still need a bit more to kill him than normal. However, there is a problem with the tankiness, and it's also a big problem with his movement speed because it also affects how easily pinned he is, especially by grenades, even now that they've changed. And that is he has a 6-up save, so you're not even saving on a 50-50 per dice. So while he has more armour and more HP, he's also going to take more hits, which is a problem. He does get a bit of help, as I said, in melee, where he gets the extra dice for defending against, but it still is a major problem because if they're using knockback, he's likely to be knocked back. If they're knocking him back into a wall, he's likely to get pinned by the wall. If they're throwing any kind of frag grenade at him, he's likely to get pinned by the frag. It makes it so his main weakness of slow movement is even worse because the opponent can very easily abuse that. So, does that mean he's not great to have? Well, no. He does have some benefits of being very good at holding down a spot. So, say strongholds, if you got him into like the 3VP zone, he'd be quite difficult to properly deal with in there, especially the one with the hammer, because he can easily clear you out. And if you come into him and then try to move out for anything, he can very easily do you in. So it has some play, but then when we go back to how the game is in its current state, where most modes want you moving around a lot, especially with short action moves so that you can do actions or do other things, and also his inflexibility with shooting, because you'd have to give him a gun for him to be able to do that, and he is quite expensive as a unit in the first place, so adding a gun to him when he's hitting on a 5-up is a tough proposition. To be fair, you're probably not taking him in a team that isn't a 3-man, but it's not going to be the most viable. You're going to give him a grenade launcher or something like that if you're going to give him one, and that's mainly because you want him to be able to do something. So if he gets pinned up and you can only move one, well, instead you might as well throw a frag. But then again, that's taken away from what he is as a unit. He's a melee fighter. He wants to get into melee, but he can't, because if he keeps getting pinned up, he's stuck. And something funny when it comes to, say, the Hazop from last season with the spike rifle, he can rapid fire him, knock him back one square, and pin him at the same time, so that it can pretty much make it so he can never move more forwards without using up items.
And he will need items. He's going to need a grapple and a thruster. There's no other real proper options to think about him. You can put the quantum on him with the hammer one, but you need the movement. You need those movement items. Otherwise, he is pretty much dead in the water. If they ever bring in a mode that has you defending a point where you don't need much movement to deal with it, I can see him being quite useful. And it's a shame with the 6-up save. If you had a 5-up save, in modes where maybe if Big Team Battle comes out with elimination, where you die, there's no respawns, he'd be really useful in that. But adding to that, if someone puts a Spartan laser into him, he's probably toast. Yeah, the 1 extra HP is going to help out a little bit, but it's probably not counteracting against the fact he's only saving on a 6-up, so there's a good chance he's making no saves instead of 1 or 2. So generally, as a unit, it's a struggle for him. His weapon options, we'll go on to them now, are incredible for a melee one. If you had a brawler whose base was a hammer or a sword, oh, I do not want to think about that. It would be insane. Or a Mark 7, because then you could give them a really good gun, in the case of the Mark 7, or not give the brawler anything, and just have him running around with a hammer and being a cheaper hammer brawler than he is now, with the fact that you can't lose it. And that's another tragedy with this boy. He's got a hammer and a sword as his base weapons, but he's not good at carrying flags because he's likely going to get pinned up by the opponent and not be able to move far. And if he could move, he would be an insane flag carrier, because he doesn't have to worry about losing a hammer or sword, so he can go in, run and use it to clear them out and then move with the flag. It's such a sadness about this unit. But going on to them, as we touched on with the brawler, they are both incredible weapons. The sword is very killy, and the fact you're getting extra dice from him just makes it even more a good chance. The only disadvantage over something like the brawler is he's hit on 4-up, not a 3-up. He doesn't have that big bonus of the brawler. He's doing the same as a Mark 7, which we'll get into later, where that's a bit more of a problem as well. However, the hammer is just insane. The only problem with the hammer is the possibility that you might be too lethal, and if you wanted to actually be a bit of a knockback problem for them. Because again, an extra dice, you're getting 2 extra dice because of imposing and smash on the hammer, which is a lot of dice, because with a charge that is 7 without them being pinned or injured, or you having a friend. And if they stood up from pinned in a cube, or if they tried to run away, your base is 5 no matter what with a hammer. That is insane. There is no way they are leaving a cube from you. So that is, with the hammer version, to be honest, the sword one as well, because the sword's getting 4 when they trying to run away, and with a sword that is a very good chance of killing straight against most things. So if you're stuck in with a CQB, you're in major trouble. The problem is you pretty much have to put yourself in that position, because you're unlikely to be in that position by them getting to you, unless you've really not been paying attention to them and pinning them up or anything. So the CQB does have some great play. And it's one of these frustration units where its movement really hampers its melee ability, and its save really hampers its tank ability. It's just these two things. If it was a 5-up save and a 2-3 movement, oh dear lord. The fact it only fights on a 4-up instead of 3 like the brawler wouldn't matter, because then it pretty much would be, the brawler is more closer to a glass cannon, but not that glassy, while the CQB is just a very scary sight to come at you. But as it is, he's just not. It's the one advantage that Zvezda had as well, because he goes up to a 4-up save, so he can be more tanky than the CQB. And of course he is less likely to get pinned than the CQB, which makes him having a base 1 move not as bad, because he has more chance of being able to still sprint. Then again, he doesn't want to sprint, the CQB does. So it's kind of that backwards and just painful situation. And I said I would touch on the Mark 7. So the CQB hits on a 4 in melee, 5 in range. The Mark 7 hits on a 4 in melee and a 4 in range. The CQB runs on a 1-3, the Mark 7 on a 2-3. So the Mark 7 is generally better aggressively. In melee, he has one less dice because of no imposing, but he's got the best save. Hasn't got as good of armor or HP, but as I said, that 5-up save over 6-up might make a bit of a difference to that. And if a sword's coming into you anyway, the 3-up armor doesn't really matter in that situation. And yes, you could put a hard light on and make it 4, but then that's a massive bit of investment to make him really tanky to live, and then they just even more want to just pin him up and not do anything with him, which is the worst thing they can do to you, really. The biggest thing there would be that, let's say, Pulse Carbine Mark 7, putting a hammer on him, he would be 54 points, so 6 points more than the hammer CQB. However, he does have a ranged weapon then. It doesn't have pinning, it's okay, but it's an option. But he also has Tactician there, and he's more reliable. And as mentioned, dying is not always the worst thing, because you get your items back, you can sometimes be in a bad position, such as Distraction or King of the Hill. So if he is a bit weaker, even with a 5-up save, just because 1 less armor and 1 HP less, it's not always a bad thing, because it's more likely they might kill him instead of pinning him up as well, and making him more useless. So I think there is, between the Brawler and the Mark 7, the CQB just doesn't get a look in. Because if you want to go specialised in melee, you're going to take the Brawler. Or, if you're not too worried about being a perfect melee one, you're going to take the Mark 7. And for the points, they're just better. Even with that extra bit of point, it's just generally better. There is some play, as I said, you can make him a walking fortress. And maybe some modes that will work. VIP would be an interesting one. But he's just not quite there. And those drawbacks are just a bit too much. I don't know how cheap he'd have to get for him to be more viable. With the bringing of brutes, it does make it so that the one base movement is not as badly seen. But then he's surrounded by Spartans who make it worse for him and look worse for him. And again, with melee, you want to be in the melee. He can't get into the melee because he'll be pinned up too much. So generally, CQB, it's not a unit I see getting much play in more competitive lists. I do see it get picked up by people because, again, he's got a hammer or a sword on him. He looks great. And people will see that and go, this is amazing. Until they meet pinning, and then they'll go, oh, what am I meant to do? And therein lies the issue. But yeah, give him a go if you want. He's fun, but he's going to have problems.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if there's anything you disagree with in my thoughts about the unit, or anything you think I missed, please feel free to let me know in the comments. But with that, I've been the Tabletop Fox. I hope you have a lovely day, and ta-ra!